and KNWO 90.1 Cottonwood, Grangeville, a community...
You guys aren't going to object to the minutes, are you?
I'm not. I have no objections. Welcome, everybody, to a Tuesday edition of our Moscow Administrative Committee. It's May 26th. To my right is Jim Boland. To my left is John Weber. And to his left is Gary Riedner. And I'm Dan Karskalen. First up on the agenda is the approval of the April 27th minutes.
I'll move to approve that.
That'd be fine.
We'll consider them approved. Next up is the Public Art Master Plan presentation. Kathleen Burns is chomping at the bit to go, so Bill Banop joined her. We'll get through that. Good afternoon.
Go ahead.
Your name is first on the list, Kathleen, so.
It is.
We ought to have that over there.
Yeah. Someday.
I'm going to have you guys over here, and then
Yeah, we could
all
turn the
see
table.
We don't have to today.
That'd be fine with me.
We're good. All right.
Turn in our
Good
chair.
afternoon.
Good afternoon. So, first and foremost, I want to start this with Rebecca Couch, who's a planner under Bill. Pretty much put this document together with all the pieces parts that have been collected through the years. So first off, I'd like to say thanks to Becky, because without Becky, this project would not have been completed to this date. So before we get started, yay, Becky. Okay, you ready? Okay, so can you see, John? Okay. Come on, humor me.
As much as I want to.
Okay. So before we get going, I wanted to reference two dates for those of you that might not have been on City Council or in your positions at the time, and that was in 2004. The Public Art Ordinance was adopted by City Council, and in 2011, under the direction of Randy Fife, the Public Art Guidelines were adopted. So just wanted that reference point, and we're in 2015. So with that, why a Public Art Master Plan? This was a goal with the Moscow Arts Commission to formulate a master plan. We formed a Public Arts Subcommittee way back in about 2012. Established goals and objectives and articulated a 10-year community vision for public art within the city. Served to educate the community about the benefits and importance of public art. Document existing public art collection and serve as a guide for organizing and prioritizing future public art installations. Identify capital and operational funding needs for a long-term sustainable public art program. So that's why we did it. Some of the contents of the plan: the introduction, defining public art, what is public art, types of public art, purpose of the plan, the community context, history, what's been done so far to date, the existing public art collection that we have to date in Moscow, vision, goals, and objectives for future projects, recommended public art, skipped a line, the public input process that we coordinated, recommended public art projects, and then several appendices. So as far as public input process, the Moscow Arts Commission was heavily involved in this. Every year I ask the Commission what questions they want in the citizen survey. So in 2010, we had a citizen survey question about public art in our community, and these were the answers by your citizens: library, municipal buildings, city parks and trails, and public walkways. In 2012, we did another question, which was preferred types of public art: murals, fountains, sculptures, functional art, architecture, performance performance art, land art, monuments, banners, and posters. We conducted cultural cafes, actually in this room. This is a great room for public comment periods and such. We did a design thinking and placemaking workshop in April 2012. We had the Arts Commission at the Farmers Market in October and November of 2012, asking the citizens what they thought about public art. And then we hosted another indoor cafe in the Bloom Restaurant in January 2013. So here's a picture of this room back in April 2012 when we did charrettes about public art. So we had a public open house tied with Linda Paul's art opening, which was March 5th, 2015. Had 20 to 30 attendees, and we sought input on the plan, the goals, objectives, locations. We did some dots for folks and placed stickers on boards indicating their top 3 priority locations. And this is an example of the boards that we utilized that evening. And this is another board that we utilized explaining different projects that have already been developed within our city. So then we went into goals and objectives. Goal 1 would be increase public awareness and appreciation of public art and placemaking and the contribution of public art to the social, cultural, and economic well-being of the city. There's your objective 1. We currently don't have a guideline, like a guide, like a walking tour guide. It would be nice to have a digital and a print collection guide for our citizens, and then also for doing guided art tours, showcasing our installations, and then showcasing that to our residents and also to our visitors. Arts events to continue, such as Art Walk, to increase art and artist exposure, awareness, and appreciation. We try to unveil new public art during the Art Walk event. So this year we'll have 5 new installations of sculpture at the Transit Center on the U of I campus. Collaborate with the Chamber of Commerce to promote public art viewing opportunities within visitor information guides and materials. Just doing a little bit more outreach. Expand opportunities for public involvement in all the arts. A great example of that is the vinyl wraps and your citizens submitting call for artists, and we taking their art and putting it into a vinyl application on the transit boxes. Another goal and objective, number 2, is increase the number of public art installations within the city. Establish a public art program to guide and cultivate at least 1 significant public art installation every 2 years. Establish a public mural program. We get a lot of requests for people that would like to do a mural. We have the Renaissance mural. I still hear from people that it was painted over on the New St. Andrews back wall, and people miss that mural. They miss that reflection to Renaissance Fair. So we need to kind of look at our walls for future murals. Collaborate with community partners to initiate and coordinate public art projects. Identify community partners, include but are not limited to. I'd like to point out the University of Idaho with the Transit Center that Bill coordinated as a project. Most of the sculpture that's been installed at the Transit Center has been students with the sculpture program at the University of Idaho. So that's been a really good partnership. Also local businesses. We have the vinyl wraps that have been installed in front of businesses, and there's been a partnership developed there. Develop policy for partnering with private developers to encourage public art installations within new and existing developments. This has not been done We do have a floating, I think it's a hedgehog, over at the University of Idaho that's on a post that was done in a previous development, but that's not in our collection. But that was not required of the developer. That was just a gift back. But we currently don't have that. Another goal is increase funding for installations and care for the public art within the city. Increase the public art ordinance contribution amount from 1% to 1.25, 1.25, to provide additional funding to increase the number of new public art installations. Again, 1% was formatted back in 2004, and we're in 2015. Establish within the city's annual budget a public art program appropriation starting at $15,000 to provide a consistent and reliable funding source for public art installations, curation, and program administration. Currently, we're at the whim of what projects, capital projects are going, and so there's no constant funding stream for public art. Partner with the Moscow Urban Renewal Agency to increase the current public art tax increment revenue allocation from 1% to 2% to accelerate public art installations within the urban renewal districts in Moscow.
Kathleen, the
Yep.
percentage is there on the objective 3.1, 1% of what?
Well,
So 1% of what number?
of the project cost. So in the public art ordinance, it defines what is considered a capital project that would generate 1% funds.
Public projects.
Public projects. So I'll give you an example.
Building a firehouse.
Right.
Exactly.
1% of the cost of that
But
project.
not water, sewer, underground utilities, those sorts of things.
Okay,
Or roadways.
that helps.
So Jim is an example. The entryway to the library cost $150,000, that project, but that project was only 1% of $150,000 was $1,500. That came from that project for public art.
Okay.
Okay? Just to give you a little math. Dan. Increase integrated art projects that are fully incorporated into the design of a larger project. Develop a formal public art component review process for all city projects subject to the public art ordinance, including a defined review period to allow for the identification of a public art integration opportunities without excessive project delays. John, you're looking at me. Do you have a question?
You know, I got a couple things while we're...
Okay, Dan.
So we talked about 1% in 2004, and maybe, Bill, you could talk to this. Has inflation increased enough, as in the cost of public construction, to, you know, that's obviously gone up since then as well. That 1% should be a larger dollar amount now than it was in 2004, correct?
Generally, you should. Correct.
Okay, and then the other thing, and I don't know if this would be, go back to that last one there. Oh, no, it's the next page, I guess. No, your next page, forward.
Oh,
where you
forward.
talked about,
Sorry.
where you talked about the, integrated projects.
Yep.
And I don't know who it would help, but if it's an integrated project into a public facility, wouldn't that count as public art? Would we, and I know it doesn't help the fund, but somehow be able to reduce the amount for things like that. That way we're getting an art installation, but we're not necessarily getting as much funding out of it because something did happen. I don't know, that might be something that we need, that I don't think it's part of this, but that might be something we want to look at as far as that might be, make a project happen, make an art installation happen where, you know, and then it's, you know, we know it's going to be there. having a hard time throwing into words
And I
today.
think the benefit of doing incorporated art project is you get greater art value in the project, because if you're substituting material you're already going to have, whether it's flooring or whether it's siding or some of the material, and then you're adding an artistic component to
Right.
it, that 1% goes farther, because you're also taking into account some of the value of that construction material you would otherwise be using. So it may not overall, it generally probably won't decrease the 1% contribution towards art, but you'll get a greater value of public art into the project, because you're able to take into consideration some of that material cost that otherwise would be part of the
And
project.
you're getting, I'm talking like, say we had, we're talking about maybe having something out at the ball fields. If we would have had that as part of the beginning, right here, we're going to have a statue of whatever. That would, it kind of seems to me like the 1% is like, if I'm doing a development and I needed to build a park, well, I can pay X, to shuffle that off. And words are escaping me today, but you know what?
Yeah, I think you get greater value if you can integrate it in the project than if you're just setting that money aside. I think
Exactly.
towards the benefit of public art, if you can integrate in the project, you're
Yep.
probably going to have a better or higher valued or more extensive installation than you would otherwise if you were just accounting for and setting aside the 1% of the fee.
And we may be able to have a reduced fee, still, but like you said, you're increasing the value, you may end up with the same, or close to the same amount of
Are
dollars.
you asking if you integrate public art into a project, whether you still have to pay the 1%?
I know you do now.
Above and beyond that?
Right now, that's how it works, correct? But I'm saying, why not, to ensure that we get some placement, maybe have some kind of reduced, it might increase because you're going to be going through the commission as well.
Right.
To go through the approval process. So I don't know if that might add too many layers to something. I don't know, especially if it's something you want to get done in a quick manner. But
Well, it could be an option that if you're looking at, so let's say just a theoretical, if you're going to say we're going to increase the public art contribution to 1.5%,
Right.
but if you do an integrated, it gets dropped down to 1%.
that's what I'm
or
talking
something
about.
like that,
Right.
to try to encourage or create an incentive for those elements to be considered early on in the project process. The issue that we've had periodically is that projects have a particular time frame they're moving on.
Right.
And that it may not get integrated, or the Arts Commission may not be involved in the process early enough to make sure that those opportunities are explored to see if there's an opportunity to get great value by.
Yeah, those are the things, we have to line up so many dominoes there to get it to happen. I think it might prove difficult, but I think it's something if we ought to try to explore.
Good point.
Well, that and you use the word excessive project delays.
Yeah,
Well, that's
that may cause one, yeah.
that's excessive. There are 15 people in this room, so we've got 15 different descriptions of what is excessive.
Right.
Well, one of the things that we're trying to do, too, is to integrate that consultation at the beginning of projects. The situation with the library was that the Arts Commission was involved at one time, then as the project progressed, that integration didn't occur throughout the project, so it was playing catch-up at the end. So if we can try and get that done up front and maintain that, hopefully we can get more bang for our buck. Like we did on the swimming pool, Fire Station number 3, the HERC, where all those art installations were integrated into the project itself.
And the transit center.
And the transit center.
Yeah, and I guess the HERC is a pretty good example with
Yep.
the mosaics on the building that
Yep.
made a lot of difference, so.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Continue.
Okay. Conduct training for city project planners, designers, managers, and other relevant staff to increase awareness of public art integration opportunities. Enough said. This is recommended public art projects. Downtown and Legacy Crossing, downtown streetscape by far had the most dots when we did our public meetings. Functional public art replacement and/or installation. We have approximately 14 benches down there, 30 trash receptacles, 24 planters, and we could incorporate 12 plinths for sculpture. And for example, this is not a new idea. You can just look to Coeur d'Alene, and we've gone up there to jury for integration in Coeur d'Alene. So this is a great example of how to incorporate more art downtown. Jackson and 6th Street is a perfect example of a project coming on, integrating the sculpture southwest corner of Jackson and 6th. You know, what does it look like? We don't know yet, but that's a perfect opportunity coming. City entrances, Bill worked really hard. I was on that committee as well, trying to identify the city entrances. Number 1, North City entry, medium-sized sculpture at the north couplet near the intersection of Main and C. That's a pretty nice little spot there. South City entry. As we go forward with the US 95 and the new roadway, and you know that project will be coming on. Some of the other recommended public art projects and parks and pathways. Berman Creekside is a great example of a good location. Interpretive or a functional art piece would be great. East City Park. We've installed some bike racks there that are pretty popular, but we're still...
Anybody put bikes on them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, especially the BIKE. That's a
The
good
bike one, I don't know about the little girl picking the flower, though, if she gets a bike hooked to her.
So possibly looking at an integrated functional art piece within East City Park. When we started the conversation on rebuilding the stage, that was a discussion of integrating art in the stage. Paradise Path, interpretive or functional art along the path. Friendship Square, we have the history of Moscow on the back of the bus stop and the bus shelter, but it could probably have a medium-sized interpretive or functional art piece. City and public facilities, the library. We've had discussions with the library of applying for a grant through Idaho Commission on the Arts to have more money to work with at the library. The 1912 Center is needing, they need a decent sign, and that could be a functional art piece as well, as an example. So this was the prioritization, 10 public art projects from 2017 to 26. This was on public input, goals and objectives. So there you go. North City entry, downtown streetscape, Jackson and 6th, South City entry, Moscow Public Library, Berman Creekside, East City Park, 1912, Paradise Path, and Friendship Square. This is pretty big.
You might just reference the copy that's in
Right.
your document.
Yeah.
So this includes essentially a capital improvement plan for those 10 installations upcoming over the next 10 years. Covers both the administrative programmatic expenses with the existing inventory, public art curation, program administration, management, as well as the installation of those recommended project locations. And then looking at the revenue streams to support the program, again, the recommendation was a $15,000 public art program appropriation for consideration of the council in the 2017 fiscal year budget, so a year out, and then other funding that generally comes in from the 1%, and the existing public art fund balance is about $64,000 right now in that public art fund. So between the existing fund balance in that program and those additional revenue contributions, that you could fund the installation of the sites that were identified and planned over the next 10 years.
What are other municipalities, are we unique with the public art ordinance?
No, we actually, we took it from the city of Coeur
I was
d'Alene.
going to say, we weren't first, I didn't think.
No.
And what are they doing? They're just doing the percentage still, or are they doing?
They've adjusted it. They were at
programming?
0.75% when we looked at their ordinance. I think they're up to 1.25 now. 1.33.
Okay, so 1 1/3 for them, and then are they budgeting as well?
I don't know, to tell you the truth. We can certainly find out. They've had a lot of their development come through their urban renewal agency.
Right, they had a big one there at the old
Yeah.
mill site, so.
And their urban renewal agency has looked at public art as being a big part of what they do. So they've got a little bit different situation.
Right. But are we the only two?
No, Boise has a very established plan, and they have a dedicated staff person that just does public art in Boise. So their collection is pretty vast. Yep, Ketchum.
That makes sense, too.
Yep,
What was that?
Ketchum and Sun Valley.
yep.
Okay, well,
Okay.
I don't know that we're not adopting anything tonight. This is going before council at the next meeting.
Correct.
And we're not even necessarily adopting budget numbers yet as far as what is programmed on that page.
Correct, that's just a suggestion. If you want to get from here to there, if there's a priority of the 10 projects, here's a way to do it. It doesn't commit the council, it's just an example financial
How to.
program.
Right. Yes, we didn't write this as, come on up, Robin, if you'd like. We didn't write this as, this is what we're going to do. Here's a suggested, this is if you follow suggestions in the plan, that's what we would have. Robin Olgren, Arts Commission Chair.
Thanks for listening to this.
Yes.
I also have Iris Mays is here. She's Vice Chair of the Arts Commission and has chaired the Public Art Committee. This has been an incredible project. It's taken a couple of departments and a lot of time, and the Public Art Committee is anxious to get back to doing public art. But this was an important document for us to finish. And I guess I wanted to point out a couple things. It's a living document. So we have sort of sketched a moment in time from the information that we've gathered, and we'll continue to gather information, and, as plans change, we'll be refining it and re-identifying places. And then I wasn't sure I understood your point, Dan. It sounded like more money, which I'm always excited about. But
I was looking for more art.
yeah, and we appreciate that. And I think there's all kinds of ways that we can cooperate and leverage. The 1%, though, is still up to, unless it's a small project, it goes under review. And so we want to be sure that we're even once we've identified a project and a place, because of what we've already gathered, we still have a pretty stringent process in place for selecting that final piece,
Right.
and putting it out. So the entity that wants the art might have a fixed idea of what they want, and we still have to be really careful that it goes.
Yeah,
out to the
that's
public.
what, like we were talking, it could create a lot of delay
Right.
for something going in.
Okay.
If it was a project that, that we knew we had a lot of time to do, that's where I'm looking at it, or something big, that's what I would think, but.
Well, the earlier we get in,
Right, exactly.
the less the less chance it is that there will be a delay.
Right.
And I think the way that Coeur d'Alene is structured, their 1.33, their 0.33 is for maintenance.
Yeah.
That's a good point, yeah.
That's something we have to look at long term.
Well, and that's what, especially when you list what's downtown with the benches and everything, those are always, we're always having to change those out and
Right.
stuff. So that might be,
Those are a function of Parks and Rec, though.
Yeah,
Those aren't
The
art
ones-
installations.
the ones in all up and down the street, or
thank you,
just
Gary.
in Friendship
I didn't want
Square?
to take responsibility for those.
The
So,
imploding one?
right now, what is art maintenance? What,
Oh, it's
Not-
just whatever Kathleen, I guess, can get out of her budget. We don't have a set budget for it.
But we've
We've
had-
talked about it.
right.
And the firehouse needed some. What do we
Yeah,
have to
we
do
have to
there?
take apart that sculpture. Some of the powder coating is failing on a stem, and it needs to be taken apart. So I've been working with Tom Grundon on what's the best time of year to take it apart, not affect the grass, the soil, trying to get a contractor to take it apart. We went back to the artist as what is identified, and the artist is not interested in doing his own repair, so now we'll have to go second to that, which is finding a contractor and a boom truck and dismantling it. And
You haven't developed a plan for public art maintenance, though, at this point?
No, that's,
no,
yeah.
not,
But that is a good point, that, you know, that extra percentage being shoehorned
Sure.
for that.
and just, you know, I was out at the pool a couple weeks ago, and I was checking the mural, the Harold Blaze mural, and it's really in great shape. I mean, we've had to replace the plaque. We did that. We've had to replace a vinyl out at the Helioterra because the pigment failed. The new wheat is Allison Meyer, so it's the DPI is higher, the color is better. Some of the basalt there's been some cracks in some of the sculptures out at the Herc. It's like, well, what do we do? Do we wait till the crack goes all the way through the basalt and then take the piece off and replace? So there's issues out there. We have never cleaned, in the history of the city, the bronze and East City Park has never been cleaned. So,
Some of the things that we need to look at.
yep, there's a lot of things. We did seal the Helioterra, you know, that took
Yeah,
some
we did that
maintenance.
pretty early.
We're upgrading some of the plants, maintenance, yep,
But a lot of that probably goes through Parks and Rec.
yeah.
It
So
does. The installation of Helioterra is still a city park, so they have an influence over that as well.
Yep.
Well, all right, I guess we received the plan. As far as direction, you know, I guess we put this forward to council next week, and you know, we'll see where we go from there.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next up is agreement for services with Moscow Urban Renewal Agency, and Gary's going to present that.
Okay, this is we've been discussing for several months the direction of the position of Executive Director of the Moscow Urban Renewal Agency and Economic Development Specialist. That position was vacated by Jeff Jones in May of 2014. The position had been funded half-time half-time Executive Director of the Moscow Urban Renewal Agency, split time evenly, and then half-time as the Economic Development Specialist. We conducted a search to replace that position. That search did not yield a successful candidate. I've been serving in that capacity with assistance from other staff over the past year. In that period of time, there are several things that have occurred. One is the discussion in the direction to perhaps move toward a more global approach toward economic development. So a single economic development specialist for the city may not be as effective as a more regional economic development partnership. So been working with the Chamber of Commerce, Latah County. Paul Kimmel, on behalf of Avista, has also been facilitating that discussion. And in the budget this year, we'll be bringing forward a proposal for participation in something that is somewhat related, akin to the old Latah Economic Development Council, but has a different mission, different board of directors, so on and so forth. So that is designed to cover the economic development specialist duties. We will still be doing some through our office and administration, as well as community development also engages in that sort of discussion as well. The half-time director of the executive director of the Moscow Urban Renewal Agency is what we're looking at today. You have a draft contract in your packets. That contract is an amendment of the administrative services contract or professional services contract, support services that the Moscow Urban Renewal Agency currently has with the City of Moscow. That $30,000 is what that contract was up until this year, up until the proposed budget cycle. That covered financial services, city clerk services, all of the services provided to the Urban Renewal Agency by the City of Moscow. We cover their budget. We provide them staffing for all but the executive director position. Up until 2009, I believe, 2008, the city also provided executive director services for the agency as well as those other support services. With the advent of Alturas Technology Park going into Phase 2, taking Legacy Crossing, new urban renewal districts, so on and so forth, it was determined that the MURA was likely ready for a half-time executive director. Jeff Jones, Travis Carey first, and then Jeff Jones participated in those positions, did a good job. However, since that time, we've got some things that are going on. One of those is that Alturas Technology Park is due to be closed this year. In fact, that's one of the discussions we'll be having with the Urban Renewal Agency in the next couple meetings. And that district will close, leaving Legacy Crossing as the single district left to the Moscow Urban Renewal Agency. So the proposal at this time, with Alturas closing, there will also be significantly less funding for the Urban Renewal Agency, as well as a decreased workload. So at that time, we re-looked at it, met with the Urban Renewal Agency leadership, council leadership, as well as the mayor, and discussed whether there was an alternative to filling a half-time position, especially when the regional approach to economic development was one that we were exploring. So we decided that we would take a look at likely continuation of the interim position I was holding. Bill Belknap from Community Development already participates in a lot of the real property development within the city of Moscow. When developers come to town, they want to look at an inventory of property, whether within or without the urban renewal areas, districts, discussions of zoning laws, that sort of thing. Community development is often a first stop. So at that time, sat down with Bill, determined whether or not he would be interested in perhaps adding that to his role as Community Development Director. In those discussions, of course, some reorganization has been occurring within community development. Mike Ray, as you probably noticed, has been doing much more support for the Moscow Planning and Zoning Commission and has been making more presentations to the City Council. So Bill has been able to revert, if you will, or undertake a more administrative and global role, which allows him to do things like assist with the Arts Commission comprehensive plan. So at that point, it was determined that he could add that to his role, and Mike would be able to cover, and Becky would be able to cover some of the other things. With that, what would the effect to the Urban Renewal Agency be? I would continue in my role as supervising the executive director, role that I've had since after I left being the Urban Renewal Agency exec in 2007. I've been supervising the executive director since that time. I would continue doing that. I would continue to undertake the role of the legislative liaison. Since I already do that for the city, it would seem to make sense to do that as well. So in order to look at what the cost would be, we determined that adding some additional funding to the $30,000 for the administrative services contract would be appropriate, and to include executive director services under that contract as well. We added $15,000 to make the entire contract $45,000. For that, the Moscow Urban Renewal Agency would receive executive director services and all the services they've also been given over the last, well, since they came into being. I think we've had this agreement in place since the late 1990s, and it hasn't increased a lot since then. So with that, it would allow the Urban Renewal Agency to continue with a dedicated executive director, a single point liaison to the city for those administrative services, and would lessen the financial burdens on the MURA since they've lost funding, and there will be a lower workload than there was when Alturas and Legacy Crossing was in place. Additionally, last year the City Council authorized $45,000 in the non-departmental budget for exploring a plan for the Southeast Moscow Industrial Park, potentially for an urban renewal area. That funding we're proposing, since we did not get that done this year, we'll be proposing that be funded in next year's budget. So the city has a stake in that as well. Once that plan is done, of course, the Urban Renewal Agency would take it and move forward if that was the council's desire. So, all that being said, this contract is not that much different from its previous contract, except it includes executive director services. And the rest you'll see in the budget. But that's a proposal at this time. We'll be having an Urban Renewal Agency meeting in the morning. I'll be presenting the same agreement to them. There may be a slight adjustment to it, still exploring whether or not there needs to be an inflationary escalator provision included in the contract. I'm currently looking into that now. If so, I would bring that forward at the next council meeting as well. This contract would not take effect until the new budget year, October 1st, 2015.
You guys got any questions?
Well, my biggest question is, we are closing the park out there as far as the urban renewal's involvement. The city, or the Urban Renewal Agency, not the city, still owns 6 lots.
Yes.
And in addition to the management of those lots, and when we close the urban renewal first crack at it out there at Alturas, and then we're going to essentially try to open up a new urban renewal development area south of town for a industrial park. And we're going to go from $60,000 a year down to $45,000 with this agreement.
Mm-hmm.
What do we do when we open the new
It's a good
industrial park?
Yeah, it's a good point. As far as the lots that are left over at the close of Alturas, we have a commercial broker who is working with us on that. So it'll be a property owner-sales relationship, much like any other property owner.
And the URA still will own those properties, it's just
Yes.
not an urban rural area anymore.
Exactly. And in the closure budget, there will be included funding to take care of the management of those properties. In other words, to continue the marketing and those sorts of things. John, your point about the Southeast Moscow Industrial Park, it will take some time to move that ahead. This is a year-to-year contract. So if the needs of the URA change and if it has significant impacts on city staff, then we will bring that forward as saying, okay, things have changed now. In order to be fair to both the city and the URA, this is the next step. So we need additional hours. Again, a lot of the things that are being done, Bill's involved in anyway. I know as the interim executive director, there weren't a lot of property transactions or developers who came and talked to me who we didn't invite Bill over to be part of those discussions anyway. So my anticipation is that when the situation changes every budget year, that city is certainly okay to say, okay, we've been watching what impacts this has to the department, so we need to change the funding based on the time that's being expended.
You would rule out in future budget years, if we take on this other project, that we would hire a full-time ED to handle all the URAs? This agreement doesn't bind us into just city staff?
No, not at all. And again, the participation, we've had, economic development has been somewhat, there have been a lot of different factors for economic development. We get some assistance services through the Clearwater Economic Development Association, Clearwater RC&D. We are members of the Palouse Knowledge Corridor. We were formerly members of, and we paid dues to the Latah Economic Development Council. That organization is changing. They all kind of complement each other and do different things. PKC, for instance, is an entrepreneurial focus, an educational focus. CETA does a lot of economic development, but also is our connection to the Federal Economic Development Agency. So they all got different roles to play. So it may be, Jim, that as things change, we may have need for different services. We may want to emphasize other services. For instance, the Chamber of Commerce has become much more prevalent in economic development than previous chambers of commerce. So I think that landscape changes, and as the landscape changes, we try to move with it. So no, there's nothing in this agreement except through the current budget year that is binding either the URA or the city.
With the, essentially with the city taking over and city employees, direct city employees taking over the running of the Urban Renewal Agency as far as the day-to-day operations, what do you think that's, or do you think that there's going to be any change at the State House level as to the viability of the laws that we have right now? And
what John's referring to is at some point, probably 10 years ago, there was at least a feeling that perhaps urban renewal agencies were merely the alter ego of cities, and that an unscrupulous city could use a URA, which utilizes tax increment financing, which takes additional tax increment raises in taxes from the taxing districts and build city improvements, and thereby lessen the city's responsibility for that. At that time, foreseeing that, we had entered into this agreement with the Urban Renewal Agency at that time. And the reason was that, okay, it's not just an arm of the city. The city provides services because it makes sense to. We already have a meeting room. We have a city clerk who's knowledgeable about the laws of open meetings and so on and so forth. We have a finance department that's run audits and those sorts of things. So it makes sense to do that. It costs less money as long as there is a transactional relationship. In other words, the URA pays money for that and the city accepts money for that duty. So that has seemed to be okay, and on advice of our council over 10 years ago, we put that in place. I don't anticipate that will change. And in reality, the city and the URA have worked hand in hand for years, as I indicated, until 2006, 2007. Essentially, city staff performed these very same services. We hired Pat Raffey to help us for a while. Then we brought in Travis Carey and eventually Jeff Jones, both of whom were employees of the city. And what they did was subject to this very same agreement. So I don't think there will be any change whatsoever.
So it says in the contract, an identified city staff member to serve as executive director. So we're not going to put in the contract that the community development director is the executive. No. That's what we'll do on this end. I mean, Bill might decide after a couple months, hey, this ain't working, so we'll put Kevin in there. And then, so he can be the, for example.
Yeah, that would be a function. The City Council is saying that, yes, we agree with that. The Urban Renewal Agency says we're comfortable with that arrangement. That assignment would be made by the city supervisor with the knowledge of the City Council. And, of course, with the confirmation or approval of the Urban Renewal Agency, they need to know who is providing that service to them.
And then the other thing, you know, we talked about, we're getting less from the agency, expecting less work, but as Legacy Crossing, you know, should it start ramping up,
sure,
there's going to be more work. But this this being a year-to-year contract, I'm a little more comfortable with that.
Yeah, it recognizes the workload. It also recognizes the economies of scale. By Bill, who's already involved in a lot of that stuff, hopefully it'll lessen my direct oversight of it as well. So we should be getting more economies of scale out of it.
Well, I'm okay with it. You guys are?
Forward it on.
And we can put that on the consent agenda, or we need to bring that before?
I think that ought to go on.
Regular?
Probably should be
Regular.
talked about.
Okay, we'll put it on the
Agenda.
regular agenda. All right. Thanks, Gary. Next up, we're done with our regular agenda items, so we're on to reports. And we're going to have a street corridor update. No, that's the A Street corridor update, so.
Not just
a general street corridor update. And Kevin and Les are going to present that to us.
Street corridor.
Just a street corridor.
Well, while Les is firing up here, we were asked to update you on the A Street corridor. Les is going to speak about the new design for the far west end, and I wanted to let you know some developments on the A Street project that is from just east of Peterson to Home Street. We've had that, as you know, in the program for quite a while. It has been historically underfunded in terms of the federal aid, and we completed the project development, submitted it all to LTAC and ITD in time for what was currently programmed for 2015 construction. It was still about $1.2 million shy of construction funds, and we had completed everything, the environmental process, the right-of-way acquisitions, the plans are ready to go, but just not enough funding. So we got to 2015, the year it was programmed, underfunded, and what LTAC suggested, if we wanted to keep it in the program, to request that it be delayed. So what we have agreed to is to push it back to 2020 for construction. Now, they were supportive of that. However, when they put it in 2020, it is still at the same value that they programmed it at.
So instead of just being $1.2 million short, we'll be
2.4.
a couple $3 million?
Possibly. We didn't have much choice in the matter other than to pony up that extra $1.2 million, which we hadn't planned on. So I just wanted to let you know it is currently in 2020 for construction, but as you know, Dan, the federal funding has been gotten tighter
sketchy at best
over the last 10 years. It's comparatively dried up.
So this section you're talking about is from Peterson back to town?
Yes.
Clear to Jackson?
No, just to Home Street.
Just to Home Street, okay.
Yeah, the original project was to Jackson, from Peterson to Jackson, but that was cut back to save money, and also there were environmental issues that would have delayed it, but that's where we are.
Okay.
Could we have picked a street that is going to cost more money to deal with?
I don't think so.
Well, Mountain View is a close second, but, yeah, one of the things Kevin mentioned, that we are trying to identify grants, whatever we can find, to be able to help offset it. We've even looked at some FTA funding, public transit funding that might be available. So we're searching under every rock. It's just a question of the cost of construction keep going up, and that, as you said, is a problematic roadway to deal with.
Okay.
One of the problems, normally when we're in this situation, we'd say, okay, we'll scale it back. We'll make it even smaller than we had planned. But I think maybe I mentioned at a previous meeting, the intersection of Line and A is going to be dropping by about 2 feet. And so we can't cut it off at...
No matter what, we got to do A in line.
Yes, we do.
So,
And circle.
because of the, and yeah, Circle Drive's not going to be a drive.
The termination of the,
Right.
the south end of Circle. That will become a cul-de-sac at that point, right?
That's correct.
Since it's being scaled back or being pushed back chronologically, and then how is that going to, is it going to dovetail with the extension of A Street out past, through the dairy out to Warbonnet? Would this all become
Well, that just
part of the
plays
same
right into
project?
That's a great segue for the next part of the presentation, which is the A Street Corridor Master Plan. So this is the work that is out on the west end that you're talking about, Jim. And we had talked about this a little bit late last summer, early fall, where we were going out to bring in a consultant to help the university and the city work on a master planning effort. The parcel that we're looking at is located behind the Palouse Mall, which is here, State Highway 8, and this kind of roughly outlined in this purple border is the study area. And the concept has been for many years to somehow connect A Street from where it intersects with Farm Road today over to where it currently terminates near some of the medical complexes here east of Warbonnet. And so this, was roughly the corridor alignment that has been out there for years, is in the University of Idaho master planning, campus master planning documents. It's in our multimodal transportation plan as well. So along that line of work, we did bring in a consulting team led by Welch Comer with assistance from Bernardo Wills Architects to look at horizontal and vertical alignment of the roadway, kind of get that figured out with the topography, what some of the utilities might be to go with that, and then also look at what lot configurations could look like for a commercial type development, large lot type construction. So we're not quite done with that yet. We're getting close, but we do have a couple of exhibits here that I'll kind of walk you through. But first off, some of the things we wanted to do in the project, of course, roadway layout, as I mentioned, and utilities, some of the general mass grading that would be necessary in the area so we have an idea of what kind of volumes we're talking about, how you access the lots, that type of thing. Potentially some conceptual phasing, which we don't yet have, and then some illustrative site drawings, which they're currently working on, and then a projected development cost estimate on a planning level scale. So some of that process shows up in some of these initial drawings. This is one of several options. Early development showed the intersection of Farm Road and A Street being converted to a roundabout, and that concept is carried on through to date, with an extension of A Street looking something like this, a little more linear than that original sketch I showed you, with some lot configurations to the south and to the north. That has
That's pretty large commercial there.
These are large-scale sites, yes, and that has progressed into a grading drawing, and this one's a little light, but you can get a feel for the fact that the contour lines are very close together here. This is quite a bit of fill, would be right behind to the north of the mall, and then a bit of pretty good cut here where that ridge line comes down, some cuts in here, fill slopes, cut slopes here working back up to A Street.
What size contours, Lon?
These, I believe, are 2-footers through here. The idea was to come up with a pad through here that is about as level as we can make it, obviously dealing with localized drainage. And they were successful in that. This concept works pretty well. There's a fair amount of earth that would need to be moved, but it actually balances pretty well and keeps the buildings up high enough so that they're visible from the highway, which is one of the considerations from a commercial marketing perspective. So that ultimately has worked into this drawing. It's still in draft stage and it really only covers the southern portion. But again, the intersection of Farm and A would be a roundabout of some type here, and then the roadway coming through as shown. We would also have a service and fire access drive coming off of A Street. It could also be a pedestrian route working its way up that kind of a side hill of that fill slope to the back of the site. So fire access, pedestrian access, service access into these areas. The main access points off the roadway, there would be a drive here, and another here, possibly another over here in some configuration. These are still a little subject to revision, but the primary access would be the center route coming in and splitting the difference between two fairly large commercial pads. These are good size and kind of typical footprints that we see in different types of commercial, large-scale retail that's out there. Along with that would be a number of opportunities for smaller commercial pads, whether these are the small restaurants or small-scale retail type facilities along the frontage. In addition, there would be another small pad located here with its own drive and parking lot. This one is important from the perspective of this structure would be directly visible down the roadway alignment from the intersection. So if you're coming north on Perimeter, for instance, and you look north, you would see this building a little bit elevated above the roadway. So the concept here is some kind of an iconic structure that would give a good view from the highway intersection. It's kind of that first thing you might see as you make the corner. And then these main buildings would be of sufficient size and elevation that they would be visible over the top of the mall pretty readily from the highway as well.
And this is all university ground.
This is all university ground.
That's their...
Yeah, so that's why this is a joint project, joint study with the university, funded 50-50. Really looking at, from the city's perspective, how could you carry the A Street corridor on through, which is important.
We're worried about the streetscape more than anything.
And how you could promote and develop commercial development in this area, which is also important to the city. From the university perspective, of course, they're thinking about, okay, what's our long-term use of this property? It's currently dairy. Is the dairy going away? How does this pencil out if it converts to commercial use, the land lease option that they do at the other mall? How does all that fit together, and is this marketable? And so that's part of the discussion with this corridor study. So we're looking at from a little bit different aspects, but very compatible in terms of, what are we going to do here in the future? What needs of the city would be served? How does it benefit the university? How does it benefit the city? What's not on this particular drawing yet is on the north side. We've asked that they make sure that there's the ability to carry an extension of some kind of a service or localized road on north to get to the rest of the university's property up here on the ridge. Within that area, study area, there would also likely be another commercial lot here east of that access drive, and probably two lots here that could be combined into one larger one, depending on what kind of tenant might come along.
But likely all commercial uses.
All commercial uses in this case, right. All commercial. So that's essentially where we are right now. They, as I said, they're working on finalizing this. They're finalizing the road cross-section. We've had discussions on that as late as actually this morning in terms of what that would look like, finishing this drawing, working on the visual presentation documents, whether they're photographic or sketch type documents from that commercial sales perspective, if you will, and then ultimately getting the cost estimate and phasing plan. We've not yet seen those. So that should probably all start wrapping up here during the month of June. Should be coming along pretty close. So that's about it on the master plan. The other things going on, the A Street corridor, just briefly mentioning, of course, you guys are familiar with the well number 10 project, which is just to the west of this, right at the state line. Obviously, we've talked about that one before, and in the process of designing the well drilling contract. That will be going out this spring, and potentially construction of the well, drilling of the well this fall. And the only other item on A Street at the moment is there's the old Dumas Seed site there at A and Asbury, A and Almond area that's been under demolition now for about 2 years, I think. It's coming along. It's coming along. We've not yet heard any firm ideas on what might go there in the future. I think they're waiting to get done with the demo and the cleanup of the site, and then probably be thinking about what's next.
So Kevin talked about how, our section A Street that we want to improve being about 2020. What does the U of I think as far as a timeline for this?
Yeah, that's really pretty up in the air at this point. It depends a lot on what the market is looking for. Mm-hmm. And, Bill can tell you that the market assessments have shown that we do have some leakage of commercial and retail out of the area, so that there is a demand. And so this type of a site is intended to serve that type of demand. Now, whether or not the university goes out and does this somewhat piecemeal and says, hey, let's look at that easterly piece as a potential site, and goes out and promotes that piece of property as being available. That's one method. They've done a little bit of that in the past. Another possibility is they look for somebody that would develop the entire area, the study area, and say, okay, let's get the road in, develop all the pads, and then go forth and find us tenants type of approach. The university hasn't really decided how they would approach that yet. I think they're obviously waiting until the end of this process to get an idea of what the marketability looks like, what kind of cost we're talking about, what the impacts are in terms of phasing on the dairy that's there before they make those kind of decisions. They need to get something here that they can then carry through their administration and talk about, okay, how do we advance this? So I haven't heard any timelines yet. Probably just really depends on how it turns out and what the market demand will be.
Yeah, I'm too young to remember how it went down when the Palouse Mall went in, so as far as maybe some of the oldsters could tell me how that worked, but
I don't see anybody around this room that's old.
Well,
John.
that was also a different political climate.
That's true. It
And
was.
so it happened in a much different way.
I would imagine.
And
The highway right there, it made a lot of difference, too.
that
So-
did, and as I remember, Norma Dobler was our representative down in Boise, and she'd been there long enough, and the political climate was different, and essentially what Norma wanted, Norma got, and worked out well for the Best Western. It worked out well for the mall and the university and the town.
All right, well, thanks, fellas. We'll see how things go. Next up is a report about Art Walk, an Art Walk update by Kathleen Burns, because that's coming up.
I was trying to impress you with my spreadsheet.
No.
Yeah. So, Art Walk's coming up June 12th, and we're working with.
Just the 13th.
Yep, this is last year.
Last year, okay.
Yeah, just showing. We're working with the Tribune and the Moscow Pullman Daily News to do this insert again.
Okay.
And just to let you know, this insert gets distributed to the entire Lewiston, Clarkston, Asotin Valley, all of Pullman, and all of Latah County. So it has a pretty broad reach. They sell all of these ad placements in here, so this cost to the city is zero. So we do have a graphic artist that is working on this, Melissa, with Artisign, and she lays out all the format, so it's really nice and clean. But all the ad sales are done with the newspaper. So we're in the middle of that. We have our spreadsheet pretty much formulated, which is all of our businesses and all of our artists. DJ just ordered 2,000 artist cards today. In case, John, you're at Palouse Bike and you're showing 10 pieces, we'll give you 10 cards to put your name on. So we're trying to help all the artists out that we can. We do have Main Street closed from 3rd to 2nd and from 3rd to 6th. So we have some very famous artists that are going to be performing music. And one of them is Skinny the Kid. You know him?
Who?
Runaway Symphony.
Oh, yeah, that's my favorite.
I know. Thorn Creek Express. Do you know those guys from Genesee? You might know that family. And the Moscow Arts Commission Band will be performing
I've heard
Voodoo.
of those guys.
You've heard those guys. They'll be at Friendship Square. Voodoo Symphony, Voodoo City Radio, and then Runaway Symphony. Those are all at Friendship Square. At 2nd and Main, we have Josh Cruz. I don't know if you've heard him sing a cappella, if anybody goes to the North Idaho Athletic Club.
Stuff too, yeah.
And he does ukulele, yep. And we featured him at the farmer's market. And I just know him from singing at the gym. So I asked him to come sing for all of us. And then Skinny the Kid. And then here at City Hall, we'll have Jackie Nance doing her violin outside, and then Beargrass from Lewiston is coming up to perform inside. And we'll have Ralph Crawford, which will be our first bronze sculpture artist. We're trying to land Arnold Schwarzenegger on the roof in his helicopter. I'm teasing, but he did do the sculpture of Arnold, and Arnold will live in City Hall for 3 months. So we're working with North American Van Lines to transport his sculpture pieces. So pretty excited about that.
So we're going to have a bunch of bronzes in City Hall?
Yeah, we are. Mhm.
Cool.
It's pretty exciting.
Where are these sculptures now that they have to be transported from?
Down near the mill on Lindsay Creek.
Yeah,
He lives down there. Yep. Can I help you, John?
Would it be possible, and I should probably know the answer to this question, but I don't,
Okay.
to open up Main Street so that someone could take a glass of wine from one end of Main Street to the other without being arrested?
That would be a Gary Reedner question.
Not unless the entire street is cordoned off and is catered as a outdoor venue. You aren't able to have an open container on public right-of-way without that resolution of the city council, which has to be done in conformance with the catering laws. So they have to have a designated area, they have to have the police and fire.
Rod knew you were going to ask. That's why he was here today.
That's a good question.
I think that that would probably help at least the feeling that people had while they were enjoying the art. If they were able to, I think that the city is matured to the point where we don't need to worry about some of the other problems that might occur, or used to maybe occur.
I would think, though, some of those issues would still occur today. The biggest problem is controlling the access to the alcohol. If you allow somebody just to go in and have a glass of wine walking down the street, it'd be so easy to hand it off to somebody who's not of age. And how do you control that? That's going to be the biggest issue. The individual venue can each decide to sell alcohol or to give alcohol away if that's what they want. And that way they're controlled. They're going to have to abide by the ABC rules, and if they can get the permit, get a catering permit and have somebody come in and serve it, all those issues will be addressed. But then they'd be able to drink it on that particular site. The problem is if you just let people walk out on the street, how do you police that?
Okay.
There's the answer.
They do it everywhere,
Yeah.
and nobody gets too excited. But
But
Line of the
unless you
road.
walk down Bourbon Street at 6 o'clock in the morning, you see some of the issues that come along with alcohol out in the streets.
and they haven't stopped doing it. They must
No,
figure.
it's still a bathroom at 6 o'clock in the morning. It smells worse than a bathroom.
They must still figure that it's worthwhile.
Unless you're having coffee
Somebody
and
thinks
venues.
so. All
Any other
right.
questions?
So June 14th is Art Walk. Everybody-
12th.
12th.
You went the
It's
wrong
okay.
way.
I went the other direction, didn't I?
That's okay.
June 12th is the Art Walk. I should know this. Anything else for the good of the order, Gary?
I have nothing, sir.
All right, we'll consider ourselves adjourned. Thanks, everybody.